Can I ask you, do you think that Britain has a problem of race? You've heard this argument, you've listened to it. Is this about just sort of cultural misunderstanding, or is it something more institutionalised?
No, it has some problems. The advantage of pulling together this information, which no other country in the world has done in this form, is that we can now actually look at it in quite a fine-grained way. I think there's a danger of saying, oh, it's all institutional racism, or...
But would you still call it burning injustice? Because that was a very strong
there are
phrase,
clearly
wasn't it, a year
injustices
ago?
out there. You just look at those, some of those figures. But the point is that it's different in different areas. There are different problems, different ethnic groups perform in different ways, some better than the white British majority. And clearly what's key is that we use this information actually to make a difference. And I do think it's monstrously unfair to say that nothing has been done over 6 years. You saw that Chris Cook chart of what happened to stop and search for black men. That used to be 110 per thousand. And because of Theresa May, it's now down to 30 per thousand. That's a third of the level it used to be. That is a genuine change.
I work with the Stop and Search legal project. I'm sorry, it's just...
You don't believe the figures?
Sorry?
You don't believe the figures?
I don't believe it's because... You're saying to me it's unfair what I'm saying about Theresa May. I don't believe that's unfair. I don't believe it's been down to her. Theresa May was Home Secretary in charge of some of the most racist policies, immigration policy. She was the one who had the go-home vans going around the streets. What's that got to do with
stop and search? Are you denying those stop and search figures? Those stop and search figures are true.
OK, Ava raises a very important point, and I want to take you to a letter, because this picks up on it. When Theresa May was the Equalities Minister, Minister for Women Equality, she wrote to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, in June of 2010, and she said, I fully share the objective of spending cuts. Equally important is fairness at the heart of those decisions. There are real risks that women, ethnic minorities, disabled people and older people will be disproportionately affected. In other words, she saw all those years ago that some of the policies of austerity that were being implemented by your government would disproportionately affect black and ethnic minorities. And yet your government went ahead with those cuts.
Well, we had to. I mean, the country was going broke, so we had to take those economic decisions. What we did also, though, and again you can see this in some of those figures, is make sure that the spending we did was spent effectively and was spent in the right areas. One of the things we've seen is much better performance, for instance, in schools by many children from ethnic minority backgrounds. That's because we've changed our school system. You've heard our speakers talk, for example, about a disproportionate number of young black men in need of mental health help. Your own stats showed BME people more likely to be on low incomes. Your government froze working age benefits. Now, that disproportionately hurts them. Do you accept that? Well, whether you're on benefits or not often depends on whether you're in a job or not. One of the things we've done is not only increase the general level of employment to historically high levels, but actually one of the good things, there's a lot of bad news in this report, but there's some good news, specifically on employment, that the gap between some of the most disadvantaged ethnic minorities and the majority has narrowed in the employment space.
But if you look at your policies continually about benefits, or, for example, a cap on child tax credit hits families with more than 2 children, we know that BME women typically live in larger families. They are more affected. I'll give you another one. Cuts to local housing allowance, housing benefit. BME families are more likely to be on low incomes in urban areas. It hurts them more.
You're assuming that minority families are going to live on benefits all their lives. I'm just saying that many of your policies disproportionately affect black and ethnic minorities that you say today you're going all out to help because there's burning injustice. And if you change the policies at the heart of your government's plan, you would help yourself to help these people. No, I don't agree with that, because if you spend money you haven't got, then all you do is wreck the economy.
This is not me. This is the Runnymede Trust, who found that cumulative effects of those cuts left the poorest Asian women more than £2,000 worse off. What part of that do you not agree with?
The Runnymede Trust were around the table at Downing Street today welcoming what we're doing.
Well, of course they are, because they're saying if people at the bottom of the pile are worse affected, you have to do something to help them, don't you?
But just saying spend more money, give more benefits, that's what we've done traditionally for a society that didn't help the most disadvantaged. The best route out of poverty, and clearly, some of these groups have got disproportionate exposure to poverty, if you like. The best route out of poverty is to have a job. That's why one of the policy announcements we've made today...
But it's a crazy phrase that to say exposure to poverty.
It's not a crazy phrase.
They're worse off,
yes,
and your policies are making them worse off. You could reverse those changes.
We're reversing the effects of poverty by allowing them, encouraging them to get into work. All you're talking about is benefits. You just think if you keep giving people benefits, you get them out of poverty. The best way to get people out of poverty long term and give them more control over their own lives is to allow them to get a job.
So you don't think austerity has been particularly damaging to the people you're trying to help today?
During that period of austerity, what we've seen is more people from minority communities get into work. There's a lot more to go, but if you look at these figures, you see that 10 years ago, 60% of black people in work. Now that's up to 67%. That's still not high enough. It's 72% for white people, but that's a lot better than it was. That's through the period that you are bad-mouthing.
So when you are heading into this budget, and you're the minister in charge of driving through this budget, are you going to look at any of those policies in particular and say, we could actually make an important difference? Or are you just going to say employment seems to be sorting things out, so we'll leave the austerity cuts where they are?
Well, we look at all those policies all the time.
But you've got a budget coming up next month.
Well, as I say, your basic assumption is that the more money you spend on benefits, the more you help people.
My basic assumption is that you've put the data on the table today, and you've let people see where the problems are. And I'm suggesting to you, it's not enough just to see where the problems are. Your government is the one that's meant to be sorting out the problems.
Indeed, and that's why today, in 3 areas, there'll obviously be more announcements, but in 3 areas, we've said that the Department for Work and Pensions will identify 20 particular unemployment hotspots where it particularly affects minority communities. There's a raft of things in the criminal justice system, including the fact that prison officers, like they ever used to be, I think 6% of them are from minority communities and about 25%
It's very hard now, isn't it?
And we need to...
When I worked in the prison service, and first thing I noticed when I went through the remand wing, which is the unconvicted prisoners, it was 93% black. There's disparity. I think if we concentrate on benefits and we concentrate on jobs, it's taking away the fact that racism permeates every single part of society. He will be likely to be stopped and searched if he's driving a nice car. The police would stop him as well as any other black person. Footballers get stopped as well. So I think to make it all economical is a mistake, because there's other areas.
Think about, you're not spending money on ethnic minorities, you might just be investing in a greater and more diverse Britain.
And that's precisely why we're
see it as spending, not investing.
Get them into it. Well,
that's what you've talked about.
It can be both. I mean, investments can either work.
But the point is, we're talking about spending or changing.
It's more than just economic. It does involve things like the prison service.
Isn't the elephant in the room here that at the moment your party is paralysed, isn't it? You are weak and you're riven by divides and your majority is unworkable, and you might come in as you did a year ago with this wonderful domestic will and policy and platform. You can't execute any of that now.
Well, we can. I mean, and we're doing it today. We've published this, which is, as I say, it's a world first. Nobody's done anything like this before. We've announced in 3
Well, you say it's a world first.
Areas.
I mean, you heard from Magnus, who said it's lovely to see all this stuff, but, you know, you don't particularly need to see the stuff on the table. It's most of it is not that new.
I really disagree with that. I think you always need to have as many facts at your disposal before you take a decision.
The facts is the step for you to then jump off and say, and now.
Exactly
right. So, and now is what?
Well, and now, as I said, I've already mentioned 2 of the policy areas. We mentioned exclusions. One of the other policies we've announced today is an external look at exclusion, not from inside the Department for Education, so that we can get to grips with why certain groups are particularly excluded. And of course, there will be more to come. There has to be more to come. There has to be more from the Home Office and from other departments as well. But this isn't a once-off thing. This is a permanent resource, not just for us, but for the whole of society, to hold both central government to account and, incidentally, other parts. It holds up a mirror to the whole of society, so the private sector, the charities, local government and so on, everyone will be able to see how all those sectors are performing.
And before you go, I want to ask you something, because we are very dominated and you are very constrained in terms of domestic policy by, of course, what you have to do on Brexit. Theresa May was asked today if she'd support Brexit if the question were asked again today, and she couldn't answer it. You can.
Well, I was on the board of the Stronger In campaign. Nobody fought harder than me for Remain, so I don't resolve for my views. But I mean, it's a slightly silly question because there's not going to be another referendum today.
So when you say you don't resolve from your views that you think the country is better if it remains?
It would have been, but the public took their view.
I'm a
Democrat. I believe that if people have spoken, it's the job of democratic politicians to do their best, actually, to put in place what people wanted. People voted for Brexit.
But can you say, hand on heart, Brexit was the right decision for the country now?
Well, I argued against it, but the country took the decision. I'm a Democrat. I respect that decision. It's my public duty now to try and make the best Brexit we can, and that's what I'm trying to do in government.
Damian Green, thank you.